This is the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey all, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma podcast. In today's podcast episode, we are going to be talking about the third practice of active recovery. And again, there's 5 practices that we're going to cover in the month of May here to, recognize Mental Health Awareness Month. But these practices are really the key to start making changes in your life. At least that's been my discovery or experience being on the active recovery road over the last year or so. So really these podcasts are laid out in a manner that I encountered these elements or practices in my story, primarily during my time in rehab, but then also extending in the time thereafter. So this week's theme and episode is going to be about vision and about personal vision. So our first week was movement, second week was gratitude and awe, and today we'll be talking about vision. So I feel actually pretty lucky because really quite as long as I can remember, I've had a generally really good connection with or understanding of the importance of vision and having a vivid vision for my life, really starting more or less from my teens with regards to being very crisp with it. So it is something that I've practiced in my life before entering rehab. And really where I was at, even before rehab, was I could close my eyes or just look off and really see the aspect of my life that I wanted to get to, or the way that I wanted my life to look. And the way I've come to believe it is that the power in setting your vision and making it as clear as possible to yourself is that throughout your daily activities, you are given unique opportunities where you're seemingly making micro decisions, but ultimately these micro decisions continue to advance you towards that vision state that you have set for yourself. So I have a very good and I think compelling example from my life, and it really started in the professional realm, but it had significant impacts on, my personal life as well. So by the time I was in my early 20s, so just starting my career off, I had an extremely clear vision that I wanted for my life. And here it is. I'm going to explain it. It's going to sound like incredibly specific, but just kind of bear with me through it, and we'll get to why all of this is really important and imperative. So my vision was this. I was standing on a raised deck of a house overlooking a mountain scene in the early evening just as the sun was setting. I was wearing a long sleeve black shirt, which, side note, I still own, jeans, and I had a little bit of stubble on my face, and I had a small grin and ultimately seemed very content. I was standing there, leaned up against the rail watching the sunset with a glass of red wine in my hand. So we're going to put a pin in the red wine thing, but obviously that's going to become important, and we'll circle back to it. So, like I said, this vision was something that I created for myself in my early 20s, yet my reality of where I was at that time of my life was that I worked a job in the upper Midwest that had me nowhere near the mountains, and I was actually quite confined or constrained to the physical location that I worked. So what ultimately ended up happening was I started taking opportunities on the professional front and driving my career in a way that actually gave me some flexibility and freedom as it pertained to my place of work. And by 2016, which I would have been in my later 20s by that point, I find myself actually working a job and in a role where I had more or less established myself as a remote worker. And then some life situations happened. And in 2018, the place that my wife and I were living at the time, it was a rental, and we wound up losing our rental, which we had been at for a long time. And it was all of a sudden just this moment where everything clicked. And it's like, okay, this is it. This is our time to move west. We've kind of established ourselves and readied ourselves as much as possible. And again, so much of that was driven by the personal vision that I had, which also played into the vision my wife and I had for our joint lives as well. But suddenly I moved out west, and I found myself in a position where I was significantly closer to that vision state. However, what I had never considered, and what I was only able to connect with during my time in rehab, was that while my vision was clear and compelling, I truly did not understand the underlying why beneath my vision, and some of the more negative aspects that came out of it, of having such a clear vision. So circling back to that wine, that glass of red wine that we had put a pin in. So what I started to experience was that my vision actually started hurting me, because now I was living out west. I was that much closer to like physically manifesting that vision. But there was this aspect of the glass of wine. I so desperately wanted to be normal. I wanted to be a normal drinker, and I did not want to have this disease of alcoholism. So I tried and I fought and I battled myself because I wanted my vision. And in my vision, there was a man standing there holding a glass of wine, and that man was content, and that man was in control. However, what I had to come to accept and change was that exact vision state was not going to be possible for me. I was not going to be able to just walk away from alcoholism. And so in the latter parts of rehab, so I discovered this and had this realization in rehab. So in the latter parts of rehab, I started forming what my vision was going to be for myself coming out of rehab. And ultimately at its core, I wanted more than anything to maintain myself on the path of active recovery. As I had already started establishing my life around. And it was becoming really, really clear for me that a key aspect of my vision is that I wanted to be there for the ones that I love. Because in a big way, I had felt like on the front end of going into rehab that I had failed them. And ultimately, for me, stepping into the doors and through the doors of rehab was certainly not a failure, but it had felt like that on the front end. But ultimately, I was getting this very real sense that my life and my vision was about being there for the ones that I loved. And to be honest, it's kind of difficult for me to say with sincerity that I had a very, very clear and compelling vision, like I described previously, between the time of exiting rehab and finding out about Lucy's health concerns, which again was like a 90-day period. And really, with everything that went on in our lives, I really had to confine and just kind of like distill down and simplify my vision. And that was to stay on the road of active recovery. Everything else was going to start falling apart if I did not maintain that. So I just really, really focus on simplifying things coming out of rehab. And then once we discovered about Lucy's health concerns, I knew it was even more important to stay simple. And so really what that meant and what that looked like with regards to my vision, it was showing up to my AA group meetings in the mornings. Like that was quite literally it. It is so unsexy, but I knew that if I couldn't be there for myself and if I couldn't put myself and my adherence to a life in active recovery first, I could not be there for my loved ones. One interesting aspect about going through the loss of a child, especially in Lucy's scenario where there were so many unknowns, and so much confusion really about even like what was going on with her, that in the moments after losing Lucy, there was really an unexpected weight that was lifted from my shoulders, and later in talking with my wife, from her shoulders as well. And part of this was that her story was finally defined. We didn't have any more questions to ask or unknowns to live with. Once she passed away, her time on earth was done and her story on earth was complete. And in the time after her loss, I was able to spend more time and think about what my desired future is and what my vision for myself and my life with my loved ones would look like. So my vision became more nuanced than just stay on the road of active recovery. And the thing that feels amazing about the current vision that I have for my life is what a resounding why it has for me. It is extremely compelling. And again, I can just visualize these things when I close my eyes, and it just helps guide and direct me in my day-to-day and anytime a decision comes up. So ultimately, what my vision is now for myself is I am a protector and a provider for those that I love, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. This statement guides me in every single thing that I do in my day-to-day life. Again, I can close my eyes and I can see visuals of each of these aspects manifesting in some way, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, being a protector and a provider for my family. Every step and every decision that I make at this point, I genuinely ask myself, how is this building me towards my vision state? And of course, the other thing that you'll notice if you've been listening along now or following along is that all three aspects of the pillars of recovery have come back into my vision state for myself. Again, being physically, emotionally, and spiritually fit. And I desire and I want for my own life and for my family's life, I desire to be provider and protector across all three of those pillars. So how does one start in building or crafting your own vision? If you've never done an exercise like this, just be forewarned, it takes genuine effort. You need to set aside the time. You need to protect the time to sit down and give genuine thought to this. I found a few key questions are helpful to ask yourself to prime the thinking behind creating your own vision. Ultimately, it's up to you. You need to decide what direction you want your life going, where you want to be going, who you want to be. But some of those primer questions that help the thinking process. One, what is your social life like? What is it like now? What do you desire it to look like in the future? An example of this one is just the radical change that my wife and I have experienced now that I'm living a life in active recovery. Our ability to engage with and grow genuine friendships has improved in ways that we never expected, because there's no more questioning, is Kyle going to be in an okay state for us to commit to going over to a friend's house or having people over? So unexpectedly, our social life has really taken a change for the better. But with regards to this one, it's truly about, for me, it's about the genuine and deep relationships that you're able to cultivate and craft as a part of your life. Additional questions: what are your leisure activities, or what are your pursuits of interest? Again, both today and in the future. What does your family life look like? Where are you with your career? What are you learning about? What qualities do you admire in people that you look up to? I think this is a really good question to ask yourself. Like, seriously, list 2 to 3 people that you really look up to. They could either be friends that you know, or people that you might just say like follow or know of due to their work. List out the qualities that you admire in those people and ask yourself, how would you advance towards building those qualities into your own life? Then a few other questions. Who do you want to be in the future? What do you want to do? Where do you want to end up? And then finally, and arguably most importantly, why do you want these things? Once you get an understanding or have gone through the exercise of either thinking or writing some answers to these questions down, really try to close your eyes and picture that ideal future and that vision state for you. Make it as crisp and as clear as you possibly can. Revisit it, sharpen the images up, and then work to figure out what you can do right now to start working towards that future and that vision state. It's an incredibly powerful tool. Work to understand the why behind your vision state and be honest with yourself. I was not honest with my vision where there was a glass of wine in my hand. It wasn't until I sat down and really started looking at that vision state did I understand that I had this desire to be normal. I had this desire to control my alcohol consumption. That was not a reality for me. I had to accept that. So understand the why behind your vision and let it guide you. That's all I've got for this week. Take care. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time.